Water, it's the lifeblood of any farming community. So when the Kromdraaispruit and Wilge River turned luminous from a toxic spill last month, the rural community demanded answers. Claire boarded a chopper in Bronkhorstpruit to investigate what some are calling the biggest fish die-off in a decade.
It was the middle of February, Valentine's Day in fact, as 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘀 set out on a supply run for his farm in the Wilge River Valley, near Bronkhorstpruit in 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗶.
My pa het hierdie plaas geboer, so 36 jaar terug het ons die plaas gekoop. Ek is die tweede generasie en my seun gaan die derde generasie Desmond wees op die plaas.
The Milner farm produces beans and soya for major food brands. Their main water source is the Wilge River, as it is for several farms in the valley. But that morning, something was very wrong.
Ek was die oggend vroeg was ons gou winkel toe om diesel te gaan haal. Toe sien ons die kleur van die rivier lyk nie soos die normale kleure nie.
A healthy river usually looks brown, filled with organic matter, plants and soil. The Wilge has always snaked through the 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗶 highveld, richly brown and full of life. Now, for kilometers, the water turned luminous.
Vir 'n trend so 3 kilometer het hy seeblou geword en daarna het hy roesbruin geword. Ons water is gewoonlik van die skoonste riviere wat daar nog is.
As damage reports multiplied, livestock veterinarian Dr. 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘀 and a local helicopter pilot tracked the flow of pollution from the air.
Hier is geweldig baie vlei lande en 'n vlei land se werk is om water te suiwer. Maar hy kan ook net soveel doen en dan word dit oorkom soos wat ons hier stroom opgesien het dat die vlei lande aan vrek. Dan jy weet jy het moeilikheid.
Around every turn in the river, they saw reeds looking burnt. Thousands of fish drifted to the surface, dead.
Geelvis was van die eerstes wat dood gegaan het en karps. Ons het vandag soos gevlieg het, ek meen, so karp. Dit is pragtige diere daai. Regtig waar, so groot karp om dood te gaan. En hoeveel het daar langs die rivier gedryf? Hulle lê vasgespoel in die riete.
Typical behavior is that they're kind of gasping at the surface and rolling over. It's equivalent to a chemical burn on your lungs.
An aquatic scientist, Dr. Jackie Dabrowski, was called in.
Well, I've largely coordinated the sampling effort on behalf of the Bronkhorstpruit Catchment Forum. Once we actually got the results back from the lab, only confirmed what we actually by that stage already knew, was that it was a serious acid mine drainage decant.
The spillage of mine water is a serious threat on the country's freshwater resources. The farmers alongside the Wilge River are extremely worried about the impact the polluted water will have on their crops. The helicopter traced the pollution back to one old coal mine. Somehow, mine wastewater got into the Kromdraaispruit, 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘀, and into the Wilge River down to the confluence with the 𝗀𝗵𝗵𝗶 River. It even reached the inflow of the 𝗀𝗁𝗁𝗃 Dam. Dabrowski found the spill was highly acidic at the source, with a reading of 2.5. A pH of 7 is neutral.
It just goes to show how aggressive the acidity was in the water, that even by the time it reached 𝗀𝗁𝗁𝗃 Dam, which is approximately 100 kilometers away from the source of decant, the pH was still around 4.
The source turned out to be the Kromdraai coal mine. With emotions running high in the community, we went to take a look. Unusually, our visit drew the attention of a large contingent of company officials and, alarmingly, armed security. Johannesburg-based Thungela Resources holds the mining rights, but Thungela stopped mining in 2020. Now, a fence and heavily armed security guards are meant to keep outsiders out. But still, large-scale 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝗀s have infiltrated the site. This is where it all started, the outpouring of acid mine water that caused the worst chemical pollution in the Kromdraaispruit area in years. Head of Corporate Affairs, 𝗶𝗵𝗀 𝘀𝗀𝗆, conducted our tour on the site.
That came out.
We later continued our conversation at Thungela's head office in Rosebank.
How did that water get into the rivers in the first place?
It's an underground mine working, right? which was sealed. And as part of our water management strategy, it was sealed, so we monitor the water quantities. Unfortunately, with the illegal mining that happens very close to the area, so illegal miners don't have capacity to manage the water.
It's groundwater that starts to fill up the chambers because you're mining below the water table or into the water table. So the situation is risky because you end up with these underground chambers that are full of water. And if they develop enough head because of heavy rains or buildup of pressure over time, or the plug or the wall or whatever is holding them back and it breaks, then they will decant into the environment.
A lot of people will put the lack of security at your doorstep and say, well, had you secured it better, this would not have happened.
Look, and I understand why people will feel that way. Even areas where we are actively mining, we still deal with the acts of criminality where people just come in to steal cable.
The mine's problem is that it has two access points, the heavily guarded entrance we used and a national road that runs right through it.
The national road, as a company, we don't have jurisdiction over that. It's a road that belongs to the province, so we can't fence it, we can't block it, we don't have any jurisdiction over it.
10 days after the spill, my flyover of the Wilge showed the color of the river returning to normal. But farmers were still frantic about the fallout.
The question, I think, on a lot of people's minds in that area is that it looks like you waited a week.
So we stopped the flow immediately when we found out. So stopping the flow doesn't necessarily mean that there's no water that travels, right? And there's also residue or sediment that we believe was actually activated in the water streams. We also redirected the water to ensure that it doesn't go downstream.
But for 10 days, the millers had to pause all their intensive irrigation, pending the outcome of test results to pinpoint how dangerous the chemicals in the water would be for crops.
Ja, ons kon nou nie besproei nie en veral hoekom die stand so hoog is, hy's baie afhanklik van water. Soos die sojas wat nou in blom is. As hy begin onder stres ingaan, dan gooi hy sy blommetjies, hy speen blommetjies, hy maak nie die volle potensiaal vrugte wat hy moet maak nie. Dit affekteer jou oes dadelik.
But it's not just the visible damage that worried 𝗀𝗏𝗃. She is the CEO of the Federation for a Sustainable Environment.
We can anticipate that in future there may also be impact on fish eagles, birds, 𝗶𝗶𝗴𝗶, perhaps crocodiles that feed from these fish. So that of course has a chain reaction.
And it's for this long-term chain reaction that the farmers feel someone must pay for.
Dit kan jou gewas heeltemal doodmaak of dit kan jou grond affekteer. Dan gaan dit jou weer jare vat om jou grond weer te bou tot waar jy dit gehad het.
But who will pay if the mine blames nameless, unregistered 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝘀s?
So in terms of our National Water Act and our National Environmental Management Act, managers, operators, directors of mining companies collectively and individually or companies must prevent pollution.
𝗀𝗏𝗵𝗶𝘀 specializes in environmental law.
The question will always come back to who is the current holder of the mining rights pertaining to that property and who is the owner of that mine. And the mining right holder remain liable ad infinitum until the government has issued an official closure certificate.
The mine has called for an investigation on how to prevent future spills.
We currently brought in on board some engineers to draw up some designs to manage that underground mine while we're still continuing, ensuring that we rehabilitate the area.
Farmers are evaluating potential damage, and the Department of Water and Sanitation slapped Kromdraai with a directive to stop and fix the damage. But for the tons of dead fish and farmers still calculating what they lost, even lawsuits and payouts will be cold comfort.
This is the biggest fish kill that I have ever seen as an aquatic ecologist, and I've been working for just over a decade in this field now and have investigated quite a few fish kills.
As hulle net kan pa staan vir die ding en so vinnig as moontlik alles draai regmaak en alles herstel, dan is ons tevrede.
Thank you for watching our stories here online, and please subscribe below to become part of our YouTube community and be notified when we upload our latest content.